In the middle of the forest, Kai's looking for a track of the beast to hunt it down. While the samurai approach him, they are suddenly attacked by a gigantic beast with huge antlers. The beast runs all across the forest, then they follow the beast and try to shoot it with an arrow, but are unable to do any damage to the beast. After that, Yasuno try to attack the beast from behind, but he get knocked down by the beast and it turn back, nearly attack the samurai Yasuno. At that moment Kai grabs Yasuno's sword and sticks it in the beast's chest as it runs over him and it drags Kai, but he's still holding onto the sword, until the beast falls and dies. Then Kai gives Yasuno his sword back, but he disrespects him because he is a half-breed. When Oishi arrives, he cuts off a piece of the beast's antler and give it to his master. At that moment, from a distance, Kai spots a white fox with a gold eye and a blue eye. When the samurai return from their hunting trip, Mika runs to ask her father if anyone has been injured, but her father knows who she is looking for. Later that night, Mika go and look for Kai elsewhere, and she finds a wound on his back. She tends to it by wiping it with a rag. In that moment, Kai says she shouldn't be here and then she thinks that he doesn't love her. Kai knows that they cannot be together because he is not of royal blood and merely a half-breed. After that she leaves him. Days later, Lord Kira, the master of a rival province, visits Akko in preparation for the arrival of the shogun. With him is a witch named Mizuki. At that moment, Kai notices her among the concubines and spots her eyes. Then he goes to reports this to Oishi, his new master, and inform him that, last week at the hunt, he saw a fox but he doesn't realize at that time, and he thought she was a witch, but Oishi doesn't believe him and dismiss this as Kai being enchanted by a beautiful woman. The next day, a fight is held with one of Kira's men, dubbed the Lovecraftian Samurai. And Yasuno is set to fight against him, but Kai and Oishi's son, Chikara find Yasuno with milky eyes, and they realize that he's been bewitched. At that moment, Kai dons red armor and a mask to duel with Kira's samurai. During the fight, Kai tries to engage in the duel with him, but eventually he defeated and his mask flies off, exposing him to everybody. Upon seeing that, the shogun notices he is not a samurai and orders the samurai to kill Kai. At that very moment, Mika get there to stop from execute him, and then Asano intervenes and say, this is on him. But after that, Kai is beaten until he is unconscious. Later that night, the witch, Mizuki senses a weakness in Asano at the moment. Then she extracts some sort of purple liquid from Kira's arm and breathes onto it, creating a venomous spider. And after that, she slithers to Asano's room as he sleeps, letting the spider loose. It crawls over his face and releases the purple liquid onto Asano's mouth, bewitching him. Then, the spider disappears, and Mizuki causes Asano to hear Mika screaming and calling out for him. Suddenly, he grabs a sword and follows her voice, but in Asano's eyes, he sees Kira ravaging his daughter, and he cuts into his back with his sword. At that moment, Asano is subdued by other men. Then Oishi arrives and notices his eyes as bewitchment wears off and sees that Kira is not attacking Mika. Because he attacked Kira as his guest, who was unarmed, the shogun sentences Asano to death. Because of his rank and the service he had done, he allows him to commit seppuku, death by his own hand, so that he may die as honorably as he lived. After that, Asano tells Oishi he is doing this to preserve their clan and asks him to look out for Mika. But Oishi tell him that, he was bewitched and his mind was poisoned. The ceremony is held for Asano to go out in a white robe to fulfill his death. Mika stands and watches as her father sticks a blade into his stomach, and then Oishi, with regret in his eyes, decapitates his master. After that, the samurai want to revenge for their master, but Oishi say, if they fight now, they will die, but not just them, every farmers and villagers will be slaughtered. The samurai give up their sword and kneel before the shogun. At that time, Shogun says he was sorry for her father's death. Then he leave Akko for Lord Kira under his control. And Shogun declares that the samurai are now ronin. Before the shogun leaves, he grants Mika a year-long mourning period before she is to be wed to Kira. He also orders Oishi and the samurai to not attempt to seek vengeance for the death of their master. Kira also takes Kai as his prisoner, and then orders his men to throw Oishi into the pit for fear of retaliation. A year later, Oishi is pulled out of the pit by Kira's men and bring him to his wife Riku and Chikara. Later that night, he asks for his men, but his wife inform him that they all have left Akko and Kira is set to marry Mika soon. Additionally, Kai has been sold into slavery to a Dutch town. Upon hearing that, Oishi order his son to find him 3 horses right away. Then he ventures into this town alone and finds Kai dueling with a large deformed man. During the duel, Kai defeats the man and decapitates him, to the cheers of everyone around. After that, Oishi steps in, making everyone believe another duel is to take place. The two fight with their swords until Oishi tells Kai that Mika needs his help. Suddenly, they fight them and find way to escape. After their escape, Kai and Oishi go and gather up the remaining ronin. Together, they vow to avenge their master and send Kira to hell. During that time, Oishi takes a map and says he will lead them to a village where they will be given swords. Later that day, the ronin travel to the village of Uetsu where the sword makers reside. When they reach that village, they encounter Kira's men and they say this is Kira's village. Since they work for Kira, they refuse to give the ronin any swords. At that moment, Kai joins the ronin as they fight against Kira's men, end up killing them all and take their swords, then leads them to a place where they may definitely find swords. The next day, Kai guides the ronin to a temple belonging to the Tengu. This is the place he was running from as a child. He also promises to Oishi that they will provide them with swords, but he must never once draw his weapon, regardless of what he sees. And then, ask Oishi to wait for him, as Kai goes to speak to the Tengu lord, a man with a face like a snake. Then he requests the sword that is stuck in the ground, and the master tells him to simply take it. Suddenly, he begins to taunt Kai about his childhood, while Oishi is in the same room as the other Tengu. But then, the samurai go after him and see other Tengu shaking their head. At that moment, one ronin pulls out his sword, and Oishi watches as the Tengu attack his men, and he never once draws his weapon. Meanwhile, Kai fights with the master until he takes the sword and nearly decapitates him. After that, Kai finds Oishi and tells him that they have been granted their swords because he passed his test and never took out his sword. But what he saw was an illusion, and his men are safe. On their trip back to Akko, they encounter a band of performers. They recognize Oishi and the ronin from their previous visit to Akko. So Oishi pleads for their help. Before the ronin make their final stand, Yasuno also apologizes to Kai for his disrespect and shows gratitude to him for saving him from the beast. Then he gives him a sword and bows to him. After that, they and the rest of the ronin then sign their names on a scroll and mark it with their blood to commemorate what they will do in honor of their master. And Oishi declares, "We are now 47. Kai and Oishi sneak into Akko with the performers as Kira and Mika's wedding is about to begin. And the rest of the ronin sneak in by climbing the walls and killing Kira's guards. A performance is put on with Oishi in disguise. And during the performance, he moves closer to Kira and try to kill him, but he almost hit by an arrow then fall, before a battle ensues between his men and the ronin. Suddenly the ronin attack and fight back as Kira runs away with Mika. At that time, Mizuki sneaks away in the chaos. And the Lovecraftian samurai goes to attack until a ronin throws a bomb. Then it explodes and breaks him into pieces, and destroys the large samurai. As Kira and Mika run, she pulls out the knife that Mizuki gave her and she lunges at Kira, then it gives her an opportunity to run. At that moment, Kai and Oishi arrive on the scene, and they fight against Kira's men. And after that, Kai reunites with Mika and embraces her. During that time, they are cornered by Mizuki. And Kai says he is not afraid of her, even though she says he should be. She then takes the form of a large serpent-like dragon, lunging toward Kai as he draws his sword to fight her. She nearly kills him numerous times, until she thinks she's taken him down. Upon seeing Mizuki ready to kill Mika, then he grabs his sword and rapidly moves in time to drive his sword into Mizuki's head. After that she reverts to her human form before she dies. Meanwhile, Oishi's fight with Kira culminates in a room. And Oishi holds a knife to Kira's stomach and says, "Know now the depth of my master's courage." He sticks the knife in Kira, and then decapitates him. After that, Oishi brings Kira's severed head before everybody, ending the battle. The ronin travel to the grave of Lord Asano, now having avenged his death and allowing him to rest in peace. Later, Oishi speaks to the shogun and acknowledges his crimes. He only asks that his men be respected for their actions. And the shogun says that while their crimes are punishable by hanging, but he respects the honor in their avenging Lord Asano. And he allows them to commit honorable suicide. Oishi sheds a tear, as does Mika. Kai and Mika share one last moment together before he must die. And they promise to find each other in the next life. After that, they share one last kiss. So, what do you think of this movie? Let us know, in the comments below. And if you like the video, like it and subscribe, for more new movie recap.